Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. Jason, thank you for engineering the broadcast. Every day. It's delightful working with you. Rich Scheben's with us in Montana. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, how you doing, Vincent? I'm just going to come out and say it. Cars.
Since
See, I'm not fighting it anymore. I'm just not going to fight it.
That's a first. That is a first. So Rich, since you mentioned cars, I've yesterday we experienced flash flooding here at the farm. Norm experienced a lot of rain out his way, but it had been raining on and off for the last week or so, maybe 10 days, overcast. The ground was wet, muddy, and so it was really mushy. And then Saturday, Sunday, we had at least, around 36 hours of nonstop rain. And some of it was torrential rain, massive lightning, thunder, rain. And we have a creek that runs in front of our house, let's say, I don't know, maybe 500 feet in front of our house. And when there's a drought, there's no water running through it. So it's called a wet weather creek. So when it rains a lot, we have a lot of water there. Well, this creek typically might be a foot wide, sometimes 3 feet wide. Well, yesterday it was 12 feet wide. And that's because of the amount of runoff. It's just so great that this little creek became 12 feet wide. On the road, if you go out of our driveway, if you want to call it that, onto the dirt road, and you turn left or right, either way, there's what's called a low water bridge. And low water bridge is just a pad of concrete, maybe 40 feet wide, and the water runs across that. So our creek that runs through the farm travels and it goes to the low water bridge, and it goes across the road to the neighbor's farm. Well, that was probably 20 or 30 feet wide yesterday, 12 inches deep at times. So the water is now receded, but what happened is it left the road partially washed out. So now if you want to go anyplace, the road's going to be missing where it used to have a road. Now some people are not used to that. If you live in a city, I don't think that hardly ever happens, but it's not, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough where you prepare for it. And that, since you mentioned cars, I wanted to talk about that aspect of our lifestyle, yours and ours, because you just can't depend on things being the same every single day in the kind of lifestyle that we have. I'm talking about electricity. I'm talking about animals. Sometimes animals die. And now what do you do? Sometimes they get sick. What do you do? Sometimes you need, feed for them and you can't get it because the road's washed out. Those kinds of things. So our lifestyle is one of preparing for those things that we think might happen, that we think would be a real problem for us if they did happen. So what do we do to prevent that from impacting our lives? And I suggest that we consider that the theme of today's broadcast and the way we do things, and maybe even go as far as to, like it's snowing now. It wasn't snowing a couple of minutes ago. Go as far as we could help people with couple different things. One, your suggestion that we could consult with people, help them figure out how to do what we do if they want to. Another thing is maybe get a couple hundred acres and sell an acre here or there to people who are like-minded, people who have been vetted, people who think the way we do, people who will work together, people who have common interests, goals, morals, values, those kinds of things, and build a village. We could do one or both or none. And maybe that's what we should talk about today. What are your thoughts, Rich?
Well, sure. This lifestyle is a variable lifestyle. It's not a constant lifestyle. It's kind of like having a variable loan. You're dependent on what the interest rates are for that particular day or month regarding your payment. And, I look at it as an advantage. I look at it as it's analogous to a 4-season lifestyle. I really enjoy the 4 seasons. I couldn't live in an environment that was so hot that I had papaya season to, hurricane season, whatever. I like my 4 seasons so I can literally take advantage of it. And this one example is I don't turn on my fridge this time of year. I leave my food on the basement floor by the doors, and it stays a constant 30 to 35 degrees. And it works great for several months out of the year. If I wanted to store food out in the woods, I can dig a hole and on a northern slope, and I can store food for 6 months. I mean, there's things that you can do with seasonality that you can't do if you don't have it. So the variable lifestyle is not just to be taken advantage of, just like it's analogous to a northern slope and a southern slope. I harvest different edible medicinal plants and different species of trees based on the slope, based on how much moisture is in the ground. All that's variable, and if you know how to use it to your advantage, you can make life a lot easier. Vince?
Absolutely agreed. But you have to live this lifestyle, you have to look forward. You have to look up, look down, left, right, backward. You have to look at the way things were, the way things are, the way things might be. And you have to save for the future. You just can't spend, and then expect that you'll have the wherewithal to prepare. So this lifestyle is one of saving, planning, forecasting, reading, researching, looking at history. It's all of that. And it's learning skills. And it's buying the materials to the resources. In my case, it's books on gardening. It's books on auto mechanics, specific details. It's wiring diagrams for different vehicles, trucks, tractors, cars, etc. It's specifications. It's torque. It's having nuts, bolts, screws, washers, wire, solder, soldering irons, soldering tips, rosin, everything you could possibly think of that you would see at a big box store, we need to have here at the farm in order to continue the operation the way we do it. And that's what it's like. And it's a nonstop education. It's learning nonstop. And that's why we're different here at USA Prepares. We're different because we actually do it. We're different. And I've asked people who've called in, how are we different? Oh, you guys are different. Well, we are different. We're different because we practice what we preach. We live the lifestyle. We actually do what we say, and we know how to do it because we've done it. That's who we are. That's what we do, and we wouldn't change it. If you offered me Donald Trump's Taj Mahal, in its heyday, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want that lifestyle. I wouldn't want to live on the boardwalk. There's just no way I'd want that. I like the peace, the quiet, the freedom, the clean air. I like neighbors, and they like us. But distance is good. Distance is good. They have their privacy. We have ours. It's not like we're doing anything that we need privacy for, but it's really nice to have it. I don't like the 24-hour surveillance by the big system, the big brother in the cities. I don't want my license plate recorded, scanned, block by block by block. I don't even want to go to the city. I like it peaceful and quiet, just the way you do, Rich. So what are your thoughts about how we can help those who are interested but don't have all the skills? Because frankly, you and I have passed the 60-year mark, and it's taken that long to learn the kind of things that we've learned to do what we do, right?
Absolutely.
What if someone hasn't lived that long to have that many bruises and learn that many skills? But what if they like what they hear? What if they like the fact that Rich Scheben does not take direction very well because he doesn't have to, and Vin Finelli doesn't take direction very well because he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to because he lives a lifestyle that's not dependent on having a boss. What if someone decides that they want to pull up stakes and plant roots someplace else, farther away from people, lower taxes? What would you recommend that they consider doing?
Well, before I go into specifics about that, there's a realization that people have to come to, and that realization is the fact that the people at the top, from academia to big corporations to government, all government, they've really sold out the people. People have to come to the realization it's no longer a left-right paradigm. We're entering a totalitarian, authoritarian, fascist, tyrannical, communist insurrection that's as corrupt as any country has ever been. So when you see consumer confidence and trust in the system getting this low, you got to think about opportunities, future prosperity, because we're seeing a consolidation of power, money, and control. Now, when you come to that realization and you realize that we're basically a banana republic, which is a failed state because we can't even do forensic checks on ballots and machines for an election that was stolen when it was a record win for a presidency, meaning President Trump, in the history of America. When you come to the realization that judges, lawyers, courts, bankers, and politicians are working for the elite and not for the rule of law and the Constitution, that's when you decide you need to do something. When you realize that civil rights policies were designed to ensure Americans should be judged on individual merit, but now we're being judged by our skin pigmentation, shade, our gender, the gender you identify as, sexual orientation, religion, etc., we can now realize that we have separate rules, laws, and accountability for different people based on that group. So civil rights were inherently individual rights defined as a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All of these rights should be held equally under the rule of law. Well, we no longer have a rule of law. We're a lawless nation. When you look at the amendments to the Constitution and Bill of Rights, they guarantee that no state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. But when groups of people are given special privilege through corporate structure and government entitlement, life, liberty, property, and due process.
Rich Scheben's with us, and we're talking about how you can do it. How you can do what we do. That's Rich Scheben, Vin Finelli and family, Gwyneth Isaacs, and several of our instructors. Kyle, Sharon, Kathy. We all plan for what's coming. We scrimp and save for the unknown and the known. And we do things for ourselves. Now, if you're interested in this kind of a lifestyle where you do way more for yourself and you're responsible for your own actions and there are fewer people to call for help, fewer. That doesn't mean there's nobody to call, but there are fewer people to call. You could, possibly call Rich, possibly call me. Contact us and we can probably help you. if you're interested in that, and if you're interested in talking with people who have done it before, not read about it, but actually live this lifestyle, here we are. And of course, you can call the broadcast on days when we accept calls, and sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes we don't take calls. But that's a possibility. We won't be taking calls today because I don't have a computer hooked up for a call screen. It's difficult for me to watch the internet traffic bits dropped, etc., and look at the broadcast quality and look at the call screen on one computer. So I only have one computer that's able to take calls right now, and that computer doesn't take calls because the application doesn't work because Adobe shut it down. Adobe shut down Flash, which prevents my application from working. So anyway, here we are. Rich, do you want to talk about some of your thoughts, the possibilities that you want to raise about what people can do? Let's say they don't have enough money to do it. Let's say they just flat out can't buy a small farm. Let's say they can't buy a tractor. But let's say they'd love to do that, but they have the money, but they can't do it because of a physical condition. So some may have money, some may have desires, but they don't know each other.
Yeah. Well, Vince, after you come to the realization that merit no longer works, that we are a corrupt, failed state, that the people in big corporations and big government are just cowering to the elite for their own personal gain and not for the benefit of the American people, that's when you get to that conclusion is when you have to create a plan B. Now, that being said, to answer your question with a little more detail and specificity, I would definitely say what we need to do is to create, and we've talked about this before, create a database. Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jane, and Sue. Names I'm picking out of the hat, right? So let's say 2 or 3 or 4 don't have enough capital resources. Let's say 1 or 2 don't have enough skill sets. Okay? Let's say they all want to live out in the woods, out in the country, or maybe off the grid, maybe not, but they don't have the ability, whether it be capital resources, whether it be fear, whether it be lack of skill sets, to do it on their own, whatever the reason. So we create a database, and we get people together based on their skill sets. So we get these people, let's say Jane is an expert, and I hate the term expert. Let me get rid of that term because I just don't like it. I can go into detail, but I don't want to waste time. Let's say Jane lives off grid, and she really knows how to take care of animals. Okay, she gets on the list for that. Let's say Sue is a really good gardener. Okay, so she knows how to grow produce, and that's vegetables, fruits. And maybe one person knows how to, let's say Tom is really good at botany and harvesting edible and medicinal plants. Let's say Dick is a carpenter. Let's say Harry is a little older and he doesn't want to be a laborer, but he has the money. So what we do is we get the database of people together, Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jane, and Sue, and say, you guys would make a good team. You can't or you don't want to do this all as individuals for the reasons I've mentioned earlier and many more reasons. So we get these people together. We say, okay, everything's going to be on paper. You buy this piece of land. We consult. We suggest where you put the house, where you put the cabin, where you put the barn, where you put the solar array, where you put the garden, et cetera, et cetera. And then you decide, say in 5 years you want to sell it. We go into more detail after the break.
All right, we'll be right back. Scheben's in the front of the classroom. And in case you missed it, class, at the bottom of the hour news, there was a sports update. And if you weren't in class for that moment, I will give you the highlights. Ready? We got some great guys here. I'm happy to be doing it. There you go. That is the highlights of the sports update. And why am I mentioning that? Because if you look at people who have these flags on their cars, on the antennas, and they have sports teams, and they're on them, and they've got decals, they're probably not going to be the ones that you're going to be working with if you are interested in our lifestyle, because they don't have time for this kind of stuff. They don't have time because they're preparing for tailgate parties and things like that, while you're going to be concerned about other things. You'll have a different sets of things that are important to you compared to them. So I get a kick out of the sports update. And on my screen, I'm looking at Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar had a problem. The same problem we have in government today in the United States. We have the wealthy getting more wealthy by the nanosecond. He had the same set of circumstances. And we're talking about, let's say around 50 BC, 44 BC, something like that. And the poor were living in squalor, absolute squalor. And they would get the daily ration of bread. So that's where the bread comes from. The circuses part, that comes from the entertainment. And he squandered the government coffers for new and exciting circuses, better ways to tear apart limbs from people, better ways to spill blood in the Colosseum. So what we do is we're a little more civilized, and we have sports teams that clash on the field. And then we have guys who study long and hard to say things like, we got some great guys here. I'm happy to be doing it. We have the same problems. We have the same problems that Julius Caesar had, and he killed his rivals. He conquered and started wars, for his own gratification, for his own personal greed, so he could elevate his stature. That's what he did. There's another guy who did it too. He did it in the 1930s. His name was Adolf Hitler, and he was pretty greedy, and he got a lot of people killed. Lots of people killed. So that's what these guys do. So what I'm saying is, if you think that you're going to be able to change the political system and do combat with a guy like Adolf Hitler or Julius Caesar or one of the current emperors or kings, it's going to be tough because they have followers. They have fanatics that follow them. Right or wrong, they have no idea. It's like following a ball team. And we're saying that there's no way that we can impact change. So forget it. Do what Dr. Shealy says and detach. Do your own thing. Provide for your own family. So, Rich, let's get down to specifics. What do we do? What is your suggestion for someone who has the desire but not the skills? Someone who has some money but not the ability to garden and put up fencing and raise animals, or someone who would love to have a farm but knows he needs and she needs a tractor but doesn't know anything about them, wants to buy a tractor, but what size? Is it a 20 horsepower, a 40 horsepower, a 60 horsepower, 80 horsepower, 100 horsepower? What about the implements? Do you get implements sized by the tractor horsepower size? Is diesel better than gas? Should I buy an old one or a new one? What about a Ford 3000 versus a Ford 2000 versus a Case International 385 versus a John Deere? What about parts? What the heck with all that? Let's just buy a new one. What about that? What about the software? What about repairs? What does it cost? How do you finance it? Do you finance it? Do you go in with neighbors? Do you work together or do you go it alone? I mean, there's a billion questions, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I got even more variables for you because I had this conversation with someone the other day, and he was mentioning the fact that home prices are soaring. Well, home prices are soaring in rural America because of supply and demand, because everybody understandably wants to leave the blue cities, because now we can see that the powers that be have a scripted plan that's unsustainable and has made America illegitimate. So there's a lot of questions. So people want hard assets. People want ways to survive. People can see that when you become a third world banana republic, favors and graft for the elite are very obvious. All definitions are gone. We've been sold out to the highest bidder. Voting, elections, our intelligence agencies, judges, work, science, healthcare, history's being rewritten, math doesn't mean anything, rules, laws, accountability, the biggest joke in the world. So people have to realize, let's look at some variables for homes. What's your plan? Now, supply and demand is growing regarding the demand in rural areas, okay? So you have to think outside the box because costs are going up for developments. So you got to think of the septic and drain field. A lot of areas you need pumps, and they're not allowing gravity anymore. You got to figure out which county you can go to where you don't have those extra costs, especially if you live off grid. Now, pumps is also applicable not just to drain fields, but wells. You need to think about where you have a decent aquifer, where you're going to get water. You need to think about, speaking of water, if you build near water, there's new regulations now across the country, and different states have different regs regarding constraints on what you have to do. And a lot of it is pumps for drain fields also. Engineering of roads, okay? If you're going to do a subdivision, you think you're going to get rid of some of the costs, you got to look into the roads you have to engineer now. You have to look at easements. You know, in this neck of the woods, if you don't have a 60-foot easement, you really can't do much unless you do a property boundary relocation or family land transfer, which they're trying to put constraints on. Think about permits. If you live in this county where I live, now, to my knowledge, it hasn't changed, but if you live off-grid, you don't even need a building permit. You got to think about lending requirements. How much money down? Now, when you go to a bank or a lender, they require you to do everything to code, foundation, electricity, everything. So it makes it almost impossible to live off-grid. And think about a lot of other handcuffs. There's places out there that have covenants, HOAs, where you have to build a McMansion on the property in order to live there. So the extra square footage means extra cost, extra taxes, insurance, and maintenance. You need to look at all that. Then look at material costs. Lumber is not what I would call, they're not giving it away these days. So you got to look at all these things. This is why I say start with the biggest piece of land you can afford. This is why I always say 20 to 40 acres for the average Joe, okay? Put a guest cabin on it. If you can own the majority of the land, okay, if you can buy it outright and get together with Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jane, and Sue, you put a guest cabin on it. It's still an outbuilding. You don't have to go through code if you already own the land. Get a loan from your parents, from your grandparents. Talk to your brothers and sisters. Say, hey, we got a bug-out place for you if the crapper hits the fan. Think outside the box. Live outside the box. Now, if you put a guest cabin on it and your financial situation improves, and let's say we don't totally go into this totalitarian, communist, insurrection, tyranny state, fascist state, and things get better, then you can put a main house on it if your finances get better. But if you start with a guest cabin, you have less chance of bankruptcy, default, and delinquencies. So you got to start thinking differently today. See, back in the old days, you could slap a shack on something, a shed, and live on it. Because of the regulations and codes, like some of the variables I just mentioned here, this is why home prices are soaring. Because people have to go through a certain process because the powers that be want to make sure you're in debt so you can be controlled. You follow me? So you got to think about getting rural property. If you're young, if you're in your 20s and 30s, I would go as rural as you possibly can. And make your hobby farm part of your job, especially if you have other people with you. And when I say other people, maybe Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jane, and Sue, maybe one person has the ability to work out of the home. You know, in Montana, telecommuting is number one. Well, let me put it this way. In Montana, and it's probably a per capita number, so take it with a grain of salt. Montana, last I read, is the number one state in the union for telecommunications. I have fiber optics to my cabin. I don't have traditional running water. I use gravity feed. I fill up 2 water tanks with a garden hose about once a month. I live with a wood-cooked stove with a 20-gallon reservoir, so I have hot water for pretty much any time of the day I need it for like 8 months out of the year, and it works. But see, I didn't have to go through the loan process. If I had to go through a lender and I said, this is how I want to live, they would not allow it because they want you under their thumb. They want you in debt. That's the system. They do not want self-sufficiency. They do not want you thinking outside the box. They do not want you growing your own garden. There's a lot of reasons I grow a garden. First of all, I love gardening, but I make sure I get heirloom seeds and open pollinated seeds and not a hybrid sterile seed. I look at gardening as a recreational necessity. And tomorrow I'm going to be monologuing, Vince, right? And I'm going to get into more specifics and detail about gardening and building greenhouses and things like that. Keep in mind, there's legitimate studies that suggest that GMO food, I've mentioned these studies, cause cancer, creates organ failure, and damages your DNA. What else damages your DNA? 5G? How about these mRNA vaccines that we've talked about? How many articles have I mentioned that? Everything I mention is not subjective emotional opinion. It comes from published articles in the public domain. So the powers that be have created a food system that eliminates all accountability and all liability. How many times have you heard me talk about liability immunity by these big corporations? So here in Montana, heck, I can grow 25, 30, 35 species of vegetables. Never mind my apple trees, my plum trees, my pear trees, and what I harvest for edible medicinal plants. You have to be willing to think outside the box. You have to be willing to read and research. You have to be willing to ask questions. Because options are dwindling. You are getting a job by merit is almost impossible now. You're getting jobs based on what group you're in. Your victim group or protectionist group status. That is it. Because they need divide and conquer strategies to redistribute wealth from the little guy, the bottom 93%, to the top 1 to 2%. This is now.
Rich, I sent you an email. If you could check it during the break, I'd like, maybe you could read this email from Mark. I just sent you an email. I'd like you to check it.
Yeah, I got it right in front of me.
Check your email, please. Before you read that email that I sent you a copy of, I sent it to you and Kathy and Gwyneth and Norm. That's from Mark. But before that, I'd like to mention this. You mentioned the word pumps, as in, pumping water. Well, there's other things that you need to think of as well. And this is something that is pretty serious. During World War II, and maybe a little bit before, in Germany, they were mining coal for the war effort. And they were blasting away underground. And what happened was there was some flooding. And water was going into the area that they removed the coal from. Water was just, gravity's just pulling water down. And it was causing the surface ground to collapse. And wash away the underground area that was excavated when they pulled the coal out. So the coal was supporting the ground above. And that's common, right? Well, we don't give much thought to that in the world. We just say, well, let's pull it out of the ground, everything will be fine. We'll just leave a hole there. Well, that's not the case. Well, in Germany, in this part of Germany, they've got pumps, maybe close to 100 of them, pumping water, thousands of liters per second of water out of the underground area where the mines excavated the coal. And they have to do that and they have to dump it in the river. And if they don't do that, the ground will collapse and so will the city. It'll fall down. So how long do they have to keep pumping water? Forever. What does that mean? That means an enormous amount of electricity. And if the grid stops, the pumps stop. They're not solar powered pumps. So one of the things I'm trying to share with you is think about where you're going. You want to go to a place that hasn't been destroyed. And cities, most of them are destroyed, like Detroit. But you mentioned 20 to 40 acres. And why would you need 20 to 40 acres glass? Well, it's kind of simple. You want to have enough area for animals. You want to have enough sunlight on that area to disinfect their waste. You want to have enough wood so that when tree limbs fall down and trees die, you can harvest it, cut it up for heat. And you mentioned a cabin, building a cabin. Well, if you move to the right area, you will not have deed restrictions. You won't have covenants. You won't have people telling you what to do with your land. You do what you want. We built our house without any permits, any supervision. The state, the county, nobody supervised us and said, you know, we think here's what you ought to do. We just did it. And you can do the same thing. So, and in terms of borrowing money, you can borrow money from a bank, but then you're going to be locked into all their terms and conditions. But there's another way to do it. You can borrow money if you have to from the seller. You can say, well, I really like that farm that you've got. Tell you what, you know, you've had it in your family for 60 years, 70 years. It's all paid for. How about this? Instead of taking the money and then putting it in the bank and getting no interest, how about I pay you interest and I borrow some money from you? And I'll pay you more than the bank would pay you. What do you think? And if it doesn't work out, you take the farm back. It's called seller financing. And you don't have to apply. You don't have to pay for fees. None of that stuff. Does it work? Absolutely. Have I done it? Yes. Not on this farm, but I bought an apartment building. I bought an apartment building from a guy years ago in the 80s. And I said, I really like it. I'd like to buy it if you'll lend me the money. He lent me 90%. I bought the building. Paid him every month. Paid him more than the bank would pay him. He was delighted. Rich, any comments?
Well, yeah. First of all, I think holding the paper right now is taking a big risk because when you really look at are we in a deflationary, stagflationary environment? Still, yes, but we're in an inflationary environment of necessities for the little guy, for the bottom 93%. Now, right now, we don't have the velocity of money to really have confidence in the system. I think we're at the end of a central bank system, and we have the potential. See, everything is so corrupt. I've talked about derivatives for a long time. The whole derivative market it's in the quadrillions. It's corrupt. It's people selling products sometimes 100 times over. The whole system is about ready to cave. Now, if people realize that the money system, the dollar, is not going to be valid for much longer, all these people who've been hoarding dollars because of a low velocity of money are going to go out and spend. That's going to create an inflationary event, possibly hyperinflationary. We don't know. The whole system is illegitimate. So if you are a homeowner and you are holding the paper for very long, I wouldn't do it for more than probably a year. And I don't know how relevant that's going to be for a lot of prospective buyers, because the whole system. And when you think about, I want to talk about pumps too. Regarding pumps, there's a lot of other variables. Think about the breakers. You need to have certain amount of amps for any electricity, wattage on generator, horsepower on the pumps. You got to think about that. Your static water, your depth of well. All these things need to be considered, but once you have it, you're in the maintenance phase and not in the building phase, and it's a lot easier. We'll be right back, folks.
I've been talking about what it's like, our lifestyle, and is this something that you think is worth considering? And Rich, you're going to read something from one of our class members, and also you want to talk about pumps.
Well, yeah, I just said what I wanted to say quickly about pumps before the break, but I want to mention a couple things. I'm going to read your email in a second here, but since we're talking about Biden to halt oil gas leasing on federal land. Now, this is really important, folks. Basically, that means what happens when energy prices go up? And pardon the one-on-one, I'm not trying to be condescending with simplicity here, but what happens when energy prices go up, shoot up? What happens with shipping prices? What happens with material prices? And again, I'm not being condescending, but it's going to go up. And this, to me, is very urgent because too many people think that it's about equality, fairness, tolerance, and diversity. It's not even close. Vince, before I continue, and by the way, I wonder with the Adobe flaws that you mentioned earlier in the show, I wonder about getting questions via email in the future. People making a very simple question, and we answer it to our best ability, assuming it's a valid question and not a troll or a bot or something like that. What do you think about doing that? And
we can use instructor. Yeah, we can use instructor at usaprepares.com if you'd like. Does that work for you, or do you want to use a different one?
No, that sounds good. I just think, as long as you're on the show, can I access that if somebody had a question for me? I don't know.
Well, we could add your email address too if you want. I'll just forward it to you.
As long as you're on there, if you're on with me on that particular day and we get a question, it's just sometimes a good idea to get questions when we give all this information. But let me read this email before we go into more tangents, which we always do. Okay. Hi, Vince. This is from Mark. I listened to you're being interviewed by Kathy and the plumbing interview and found them interesting and educational. Please do more of them, particularly automotive issues. Okay. I'm about ready to stick my finger down my throat for automotive issues, but I know Vince loves it. Okay. Continuing. You asked if listeners were interested in starting a community with 1 to 2 acre parcels. I'd be interested if it had a plentiful supply of either surface water or underground drinkable water that could be easily pumped in the event of an electrical outage. It would also need to have good sunshine for gardening and ideally have a wooded area for getting firewood for heating. A security system to keep out unwanted persons would also be important. Would it be located in the Ozarks? ? Mark. Vincent.
Okay. Can you read my response to Mark?
Oh, you bet. Hey, what's your acronym? What's your DIY mean?
It means do it yourself.
Okay.
So, for example, at AutoZone, they have, when they sell parts across the counter, they have 2 sides of their business. One is the DIY side. That would be the guy who wants to change his own oil, or the gal who wants to change the spark plugs, that kind of thing. And they walk in, they say, hey, do you have, these parts? And the other side would be what we are, which would be commercial. And that would be for, garages and shops and, those kinds of things. So DIY traditionally now means do it yourselfer. So there's DIY plumbing. That's the guy or gal who wants to repair the faucet, change the outlet, do it yourself. Save money, do it yourself. So our broadcast is really focused toward the person who wants to be a do-it-yourselfer, a do-it-yourself farmer, a do-it-yourself mechanic, a do-it-yourself electrician, plumber, roofer, framer, raise chickens, all of that. We are aimed at do-it-yourselfers because that's who we are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now here's Vince's response. Mark, thank you for your kind words. I'll be teaching more classes about tips from my not-for-sale book, and that includes a significant amount about automotive tips and do-it-yourself repairs. The USA plan to teach DIY classes and to enable the student to take immediate and positive actions in his or her life. Dr. Norm Shealy has written over 30 books regarding DIY health improvements through thought and actions. Every class is packed with his DIY advice. He holds many patents. I'll tell you, this is a little sidebar. Dr. Norm Shealy, Vince, is truly an American treasure. He is such an anomaly. He just impresses me with his knowledge. Not only has he not lost one iota of knowledge, he gains it on a daily basis. It's just he really is truly impressive.
All right, let me add something to that.
Vince's response.
Let me add something to that, Rich, that I have never said before, I don't believe. Dr. Norm Shealy has picked me as a friend first. Literally. He saw me going into the radio station studio. I followed him. He was on once a week for an hour, and I was on 5 days a week, the hour after his. And he would see me, and watched me walk in with my knees knocking and, I was terrified to get behind the microphone. And he saw that and he fixed that with his Bliss oils. And he welcomed me to be his friend first. And so I just want to share that. He is truly amazing, absolutely amazing. And
I really enjoy interviewing him. I was kind of disappointed yesterday when I monologued and he didn't show up, obviously, because he called in and said he couldn't make it because of the flash floods. And I was disappointed. I really enjoy, because he's such a great teacher. You can't stump him. You just can't stump him. Okay,
pretty much on anything.
Response. Rich Scheben wrote a book on his DIY off-grid living experiences, what it takes, why he did it, and why it is like. And by the way, Rich Scheben knows every 1970s disco song. No, I just added that in there just for a little laugh. Okay. Gwyneth Isaac lives off the grid on a farm in Australia and shows her down-to-earth DIY experiences. She has written numerous books also. Kathy teaches us how to save money, make things last longer, provide a lady point of view towards all things that are difficult to do. Bert teaches us about things that we can measure but not actually see, something that we know how it behaves but not know exactly what it is. That is electricity. He holds patents. You can expect to hear more of the above. On Tuesday, Rich and I will be discussing a low-cost plan, Plan A and Plan B, parcels of land in the Missouri Ozarks, very close to our farm. We may be able to secure land that can be had for about $2,000 per acre for like-minded people. It would have sunshine, 4 seasons, rainfall, underground water, low taxes, hardwoods, and evergreens, views of nature, wild animals, gardening areas, location for a fish pond, etc. Security comes in many forms. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let me know. I'm taking the liberty of sharing this email with the above-mentioned instructors. Thank you, Vincent.
Yeah, I have just one comment. And when I talked about Bert in that email, I said, quote, Bert, I'm talking about Bert Bertonis, our electronic engineer in California. He designs radio frequency communication systems. He consults with the largest of the large cell phone companies when they can't figure out how to do it. They ask him, and he fixes the problems. Here's what I said. Bert teaches us about things that we can measure, but not actually see. Something that we know how it behaves, but not know exactly what it is. That is electricity. So what I was saying, class, is that we know how electricity behaves, but we don't know what it is. And that's the truth. We really don't know what it is. But we know how to manipulate it, how to cause it to do things that we want it to do. But we really don't know what it is. So that's what that was all about. So, Rich, what we're saying is that USA Prepares is going to focus on practical advice, practical solutions, how to do it, why it's happening, what to do about it, how to avoid the calamities, and prepare for your own survival and your family's survival the way we do. That's the only way we can teach you is the way we do it. So one thing that's really, really critical is you have to get the right location. You have to find a place, and it took 20,000 miles for Mrs. Finelli and me in the truck to find our farm in Missouri. We traveled all over. Of course, we looked at maps first. We looked at topography. We looked at the rise and fall of land. We looked at the quality of the soil. We looked at the hardwoods, the softwoods, and we looked at taxes, and we looked at electric substations. We looked at where are the nuclear reactors. We looked at where are what would we be downwind from if the wind blows from the west and goes toward the east? What are the seasons like? What would the neighbors be like? So what most people do, which is exactly the wrong thing, most people do this, and correct me if I'm wrong, class. Most people say, hey, honey, I got a job offer and it's Chicago or New York or California, and that's where we're moving. They move to where the job is. Now, what we have done is nothing like that. We didn't go to where the job was. We didn't have a job. And that takes planning, and that takes savings, and it doesn't happen instantly. It took years. It took like over 50 years for me and Mrs. Finelli. But it took like-mindedness. It takes marrying the right person or having the right partner with you. And I'm thinking if you're a guy, it should be a gal. If you're a gal, it should be a guy. Because it doesn't work out so well when it's a same-sex partnership, if there's sex involved. It doesn't work out in the long run. If you don't believe me, just look at Hollywood. It doesn't work. So you have to, and that thing about opposites attract, yeah, that's with magnets. But that's not with people. Well, it's true. Rich, if Mrs. Finelli was a dyed-in-the-wool crazy spender, and she came home and said, "Hey, Vin, you like red, right? Because I just bought a brand new red Ferrari. You're going to love it." I mean, that would drive me crazy. I mean, just spending recklessly with Drake. And if I did it, it would drive her crazy. And literally, I wouldn't buy a can of paint for our house without checking with Mrs. Finelli. Not that I need her permission, but half of it's her money. It is my duty to ask her if she agrees with spending that half a can of paint's worth of money, which would be hers, without her permission. It'd be wrong to do that. And that's why marriages can last a long time. Class, I'd like to read an email that I received. And, quote, $2,000 for a parcel of land in rural Missouri with fellow survivalists? That's an unbelievable bargain. It's too bad that no matter how prepared you are, someone with a bigger gun will take it all from you. That's why your idea about parcels of land sound like a good one. You could be in a community with like-minded people, people that are prepared, hard workers, people that want to protect what they have and aren't afraid and believe in the rule of law. I would like to build a small cabin inside a glass greenhouse, like a terrarium. I'd raise chickens and goats for milk and grow tomatoes and grapes and help feed the community. And I would be in heaven. Signed, Linda. So that came in. I read it verbatim. I had a comment and I let Linda know that, a greenhouse is a great thing, but you can't live in a greenhouse because of the mold. And mold is a ever-present problem with greenhouses. So it's great for, because of the moisture. And although the sun can disinfect it, the mold seems to just show up. And I know a guy and gal who wanted to build a house, and they wanted to attach a greenhouse to the house, and they wanted to heat their house with the greenhouse. So the sun would fall on the greenhouse. They would have the hot air from the greenhouse go into the house and circulate back and forth between the greenhouse, which was connected to the house. So think of maybe a third of the house, the greenhouse, and 2/3 being the living quarters, with the air flowing between them. Well, in theory, it sounds okay, but in practicality, the mold would kill you. So it doesn't work. They have to be separate in my world. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. So I would separate them. And of course, if you want to use heat exchangers, you could have a heat exchanger in the greenhouse. The sun could heat water, in black pipe, and then send that hot water into the house and then exchange it with another heat exchanger. Of course, that would, you'd have to either use gravity flow convection or you would have a pump. But, there are a lot of things to be considered. And that's what Rich Scheben was talking about. There are a lot of ways of doing it. And how many watts do you want to spend, and where are you going to get those watts? Right? So, like in Germany, it's a great idea that they're pumping the water to keep the city from collapsing, literally, falling down. But they have to pump water forever. And the minute they stop, the city collapses. Now, would you like to live in that city? Probably most of the people don't even know that that's happening. They don't even know that their city is a house of cards. They don't know that. They think everything's just fine. Kind of like, there's lots of mines that have pumps. And that's why you don't want to support fracking, because fracking fractures the ground. Do you want to have someone have underground rights to your land and they can mine it and then they can take out whatever they want? You have the surface rights and they destroy what's underneath and then your buildings collapse? Do you want that? So the thing to do is to find land that hasn't been destroyed yet. So that means getting farther and farther out from where people have destroyed it. And that's what people have done. They've destroyed land. And you want to be in a place where the government is just like you. They don't want roads with sidewalks. They don't want superhighways. They don't want to attract businesses like Amazon that'll come in and cost the taxpayers money. You have to find places that don't want that. As a matter of fact, when we moved to Missouri, they were terrified of me. The people in the government were terrified of me. I'm talking about the county commissioners, because they thought I was from California and I wanted sidewalks and police and 911 and all the rest of it. And I said, no. The reason I moved here is because we don't have these things here. You haven't destroyed the land yet. So that's why I'm here. I don't want sidewalks. I don't want traffic lights. I don't want a mayor's office. I don't want that. I live in a town with no mayor. I live in a town with no government. I live in a town with no police force, no dog catcher, nothing. And it's great. It's really great. But you have to be willing to accept that there are no rules. That means that if you want to build a 2,000 square foot house and you expect that your neighbor is going to build a house just like yours and his neighbor is going to build one just like his and her neighbor is going to build one just like hers, that's not the case. You can have a nice house next to a shack where we live, next to a fallen down shack that's been abandoned 40 years ago. So if you're willing to accept that, you can have low taxes. If you don't like that, you can pay high taxes. Rich, I heard two things that surprised me during this broadcast, during the commercials, and during the news. I just heard from USA Radio News. They said, the announcer said, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time this morning. And I heard a commercial use the word please, as in please call us. You know, it used to be call us. Now it's please and thank you. I guess maybe they listen to this broadcast and they hear us open the broadcast and thank our students and instructors, thanking those in class for being with us today. Thank you for being with us today. Right? Mm-hmm. And please. Well, I think it's great. So congratulations to those two organizations. The one that said please in the commercial, and also the one that said, in the USA Radio News that said, thank you. Rich, please continue with your thoughts.
Well, I just want to expand the list. When you were talking about, we both gave a pretty long list today about what you need to move rural and be self-sufficient. I also say go to a place where your interests and hobbies are. Okay? It could be botany. It could be rivers and lakes. It could be hunting and fishing. It could be a place that has really good grass for the size of the herd that you want because you're really into animals. Think natural resources. Think skill sets. And when I say skill sets, not just the ones that you have to hone and improve, but skill sets that you want to acquire. And I would also think about your ability to live rugged, okay? The way I live, I always call it glamping, and I know that term gets overused, but it's very appropriate. It's combination, it basically means glamour camping. That's kind of how I do it here. And I love nature, and I really don't have any other choice but to live this way, to be honest with you. But it's really been a goal or a dream life, if you will, living this way, living self-sufficiently, harvesting my own meat, my own fish, preserving it, living below my means, making my own power, harvesting my own firewood, which I do on my own property. There's just so many aspects to this lifestyle, which is so rewarding because the system
Rich,
is
can I interrupt
so
you for a second?
illegitimate. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second? You said
Sure.
something that is very critical. Living below your means. Would you explain to the class what that really means? Because Mrs. Finelli, I, and the family do the same thing. We live below our means. What does that mean to Rich Scheben?
Well, it's a little bit of now and a little bit of where we're going. When you look at where we're going, we see a rigging of the game. You see group identity politics, eliminating our jobs, central bank situations, controlling everything. You see robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and technocracy taking away opportunities for the masses. So you got to look at where is your money flow, your cash flow coming from, and when I say living below your means, you got to react to what is now and coming in the future regarding your sustainability and how you're going to spend that money. So if you have $100 in the bank, in fact, I'll even use it as an energy analogy. Like in the winter months, right now, the days are short, so I have to supplement my my power by putting amps and voltage into my DC batteries through an AC generator, which goes through my inverter charger. And I'm going to try and talk about some of that stuff in gardening tomorrow. So if I don't have a lot of energy at this time of year because it's more cloudy and the days are shorter, I don't use as many lights. I don't use as much power for appliances. Okay, I'll do things like when I shut off my coffee maker, or at this time of year, once it goes through and produces coffee, I'll take the coffee maker, what do you call it? Well, the thing the coffee goes into with the tempered glass, and I'll put it on the wood stove. So I shut off the power to the coffee maker so I don't use it. So that's just a small example of what I do during the shorter, more cloudy days. So if I don't have, so when I say living below my means, obviously most people make that as a representation towards spending money. So if I have $100 in the bank, why would I go out and spend $110? Because not only do I have liquidity and solvency issues after that, I might even have to pay interest because I'm now in debt. I'm in the red. So everything I do is with common sense. I get my firewood before the winter, the ant grasshopper story. I harvest my garden in the fall. Again, the ant grasshopper story. So I try to make sure that I am prepared for winter and I don't have to go out and the same thing with my straw and my hay for the goats. I want to make sure that I don't have to go out at the end of the winter and pay top dollar prices for products and services that everybody is looking for. That's why at that particular time of the month or time of the year, when prices are higher, that's why a lot of people get their propane filled up in their tanks not too late into the summer or the fall so they can pay lower prices. So living below your means is knowing what the costs are and the availability is regarding seasonality and the products that you use. So it's not always analogous to the money in the bank scenario, but that's what most people, I believe, use that saying for. Vince, did I make that clear?
Yeah, and so when you're talking about the coffee, what you're saying is you have a fixed amount of electricity in your battery bank at any one time. Now, you can add more to it with the sun, if you have the sun, if it's sunny out, or you can fire up that generator and add current, add charge to that battery bank. Now, if you were careless and you said, you know what, I'm not worried about it, I'll just run this coffee maker. So you make your coffee and then you leave it plugged in to keep it warm. Now you could have the electricity keep it warm, drain your battery bank while doing that, and then go and start your generator and use up the, you'd have the wear and tear on your generator plus the fuel consumption, plus putting hours of wear on your generator. You could do that. Or you could say, you know what, I'll just take that coffee carafe, that glass coffee pot, move it from the coffee maker, which you've just unplugged, so you're not using any more current from your battery bank, and move it to the wood stove, which is running anyway. So that is saving money so that you don't have to go find more money or more gasoline or more wood or whatever it is. You're saving by being careful. That's like buying T-shirts in the winter. That's the time to buy T-shirts when no one's thinking about T-shirts. Long sleeve shirts, the time to buy them is in the summer. Now, if I had $10 in my pocket and it were the good old days and you could walk around and go shopping, I would never say, I got $10. Hey, Mrs. Finelli, you and me, let's go to Starbucks. Let's get 2 cups of coffee. I got $10. We can go get 2, not 1, 2 cups of coffee. I would never do that because I live below my means. I wouldn't do something that I would consider frivolous and extravagant. Cup of coffee for $5, that's nuts to me. For $8, I could probably buy a 50-something ounce can of coffee and make, 200 cups. And instead of buying those instead of buying those paper coffee filters, we have a stainless steel coffee basket and we wash it out every day. So we don't throw away those paper coffee filters because we use a reusable coffee filter in one of those plug-in electric coffee makers. We do the same thing. We use, when we look at our battery bank, do we have enough current to make coffee? We do the same thing. We live below our means. And you don't have
Vince,
to.
Let me also give an analogy regarding, since we were talking about homesteading and pioneering. Let me give you an analogy for that. Let's say when you want to save money, so you bring a backhoe on your property. Have a list and have a plan of where you want to use that backhoe. Dig the foundation, improve some roads, do your raised bed gardening. Maybe even have them stick his bucket in the ground, pull the soil out, and you stick in your fence post so you don't have to, maybe an outhouse. So when you can plan and think with foresight, especially in the homesteading pioneering realm, think about what you could do to kill as many birds with one stone as possible. So, because when you are hiring machinery, they charge you for shipping it out. They got to put it on a flatbed. They got to hoist, tie it down with chains. I mean, it's a process. It's an operation. So every time you do something, think with that foresight and say, well, when I do this, it's just like building a garden. Do your raised beds first, bring in the soil, build your greenhouse, and then put the fencing around it so you can bring in machinery up to places you want to work and make your job easier. So think about the order you do things. So when you pioneer land, when you homestead it, you think about everything, not just the building of your cabin or your house. You think about your outbuildings. You think about your garden. You think about your fencing. You think about your solar array. You think about all this stuff. And see, this is why I talk about that example about Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jane, and Sue. How we can consult and help people and give them ideas and solutions on how to go about it. Because it's very obvious that controlling one's own destiny is almost impossible. Okay? If it is possible, it's only possible because of what group you're in, which means you're not earning the position. It's basically a divide and conquer strategy to create infighting and chaos. So this is why living off the land, going rural, and relearning those 19th century skills and dovetailing them with 21st technology makes you a thinker and not a follower, because you're doing things. And I'll tell you, when it comes to hobbies and interests, you can't get a better lifestyle. Whether you're taking care of the animals, whether you're hunting and fishing for your meat, whether you're butchering your own animals, whether you're harvesting. When you harvest firewood on your own property, you are literally managing your forest. When a tree is, maybe it's bent, maybe it's dead, maybe it's dying, so you cull that out of the forest to prevent fire hazards. So everything that you do has long-term benefits, especially when you have animals like dogs and goats and chickens and the compost pile. I have zero waste of food, zero. It's all 100% accountable. So this is the way you have to think. We'll be right back after the break, folks.
If what you are learning today is something that you're interested in, if you'd like to pursue this kind of lifestyle, just send me an email, and I'll make sure that Rich Scheben gets a copy of it. So just send it to instructor@usapreparers.com. Instructor, INSTRUCTOR, at USAPREPARES.com. And we'll try our best to answer your questions succinctly and as completely as we can in a succinct manner. So you may hear from one or both of us. And the other thing is Gwyneth Isaacs is having a tough go of it. She really hurt herself when she fell off that horse. And so she broke ribs, collarbone, punctured a lung, and collapsed it. And she's at home now, and she's recovering. I guess she thought that she would be up to being on the air tomorrow, and I sent her an email, and I said, no, I don't think so. And I want her to heal, because doing 2 hours of talk radio stuff on the lungs and the chest, and she really doesn't need to do that. So I've taken the liberty to let her know that she will not be on the air for her own good tomorrow and the following Wednesday. And so we'll see how she's doing. Her slot is her slot. She's got Wednesday. So I don't want anybody to think that that's going to be given to somebody else. That's not the case. It's her slot, and she's earned it. And I'm delighted to be broadcasting with her. So I'm sure Rich and everyone else here at USA Prepares is as well. So Gwyneth will not be here for the next 2 Wednesdays. Rich will be filling in for her tomorrow. He'll be talking about the same kind of things that we're talking about today. And it would be great if you are inclined to send her an email and tell her your thoughts. She'd love to hear from you. And you can use the USA Prepares email, instructor@usaprepares.com. Doesn't have to be long, but I'm sure in her condition of bed rest, and more bed rest, she would love to be able to hear from the class. So please consider doing that. She would love it. And she's expressed her thanks for those of you who have already sent her emails. She's gotten every single one of them that has come to instructor@usaprepares.com. Back to you, Rich. Rich, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Vince?
I can now, yes, great.
Okay.
Please continue.
Yeah, Gwyneth is a very valuable resource, and she is a patriot, even though she's from Australia. The term patriot basically means people who appreciate freedom, liberty, the rule of law, which we aren't even close to having. And I know a lot of people who've fallen off of horses and been severely damaged. They're very big, powerful animals. I know a couple people who've been killed. So just like anything, getting in your car, crossing the street, I mean, you take a chance with life, but going back to, the illegitimacy issue that is facing free, loving people. Here's an Arizona update. A new article just came out a few minutes ago. Grassroots leaders demand a fair audit of Maricopa County ballots. Good luck. One county, 11% of votes in Arizona, signatures didn't even match. 11%. Up to 68% of the ballots had to be adjudicated. That means it goes to a pile, and somebody who's been bought and paid for says, okay, well, that's a Biden vote, that's a Biden vote, that's a Biden. We are so corrupt. This is why you need to think about pioneering, about homesteading, about living off the grid, about growing your own produce, about just trying to control as much of your own destiny as possible. We don't do it all. Nobody does it all. Vince likes to work on cars. I don't drill for my own oil and refine my own gasoline. People, you have to pick and choose certain things. That's why you always hear me say food, water, shelter, and energy. Try to make as much of that as you possibly can, and there's many subsets underneath that. This is the only way to survive because the system is so corrupt. We are a banana republic. I hate to say it, but our own Supreme Court, our judges, our courts, our lawyers didn't even look at evidence. Our own military isn't even looking at the words oath and code and duty when we have so much evidence of constitutional breaking, of foreign interference. And that's when the military should step in because they are our last line of defense. No one has helped. Everybody at the top, at every institution, is bought and paid for or blackmailed. There's no options, people. The only way to survive is to think about self-sufficiency, homesteading, pioneering, the way we live. I don't see a plan B. We're too corrupt. Vince, last word?
Well, how can I argue with that, right? Because we do it. Class, you're really pretty much on your own. There's no one to call, except maybe you can call us. Send us an email. But other than that, 911, I don't think that's a great option. You need to take care of your own business.